Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Efrosini Sumalida Sims, and I am the subject lead for 11 to 16 PSHE at Jigsaw Education Group. Let's make a start on our webinar today. The webinar today will cover the realities of young people and their exposure to pornography in today's modern society. We're going to look at related online influences and what the 2026 RSHE updated statutory guidance says about what schools are expected to teach when it comes to pornography. We're also going to have a little think about how schools can deliver this content safely and appropriately through a spiral curriculum approach. And I'm going to be sharing some practical strategies and top tips towards the end of the webinar on how you can have these conversations, which might be a little bit tricky and sensitive and embarrassing at times, in our classrooms. Young people are growing up in a very, very different world to maybe you or I did. It's a digital world, a world shaped by social media, AI, and unfortunately, very easy access to sexual content. And what we're seeing as educators is that this is influencing their understanding and expectations of sex, relationships, and consent. As we move through the webinar today, I'd like you to reflect on the 3 questions on the slide. I want you to think about your own teaching practice, your curriculum, your setting, and think about how confident and prepared you feel to teach the new content in September 2026. There is no single legal definition of pornography in the UK, but it's generally understood as sexually explicit material, images, video, or text, which is intended to sexually arouse the viewer, and it's intended for 18 years plus. Viewing pornography is not a criminal offence for minors because the focus is on safeguarding and prevention rather than punishment. Now, I'm referencing these laws and this legal framework here to really ground the discussion we're going to have today in the statutory context that underpins the RSHE guidance and also our statutory safeguarding duties as educators. The Online Safety Act, which came into force in 2023, and Ofcom regulations place strict duties and expectations on companies that provide pornography. There are now age verifications and further legislation in place which addresses harms such as extreme pornography, cyber flashing, and non-consensual image sharing, also known as revenge porn. Now, while we have all these policies and laws that focus on prevention, consent, and safeguarding young people, unfortunately, they are still accessing it. Our young people, like I said at the start, are growing up in a very, very digitalised world, and they're very, very digitally skilled, far more than I am. And so schools are constantly having to adapt to a rapidly changing digital landscape, regardless of having these laws in place. A recent study conducted by England's Children's Commissioner has found that exposure to online pornography among minors has increased, even after the enactment of the Online Safety Act in 2023. The data on your slide is raw, it's troubling, and it's very, very hard hitting because it shows us as educators the realities of what our young people are facing, what they're dealing with. So I'm just going to give you a moment to reflect on it, process it, and consider why teaching pornography is needed now more than ever. And unfortunately, the data continues. And the worry here is that with pornography, a persistently neglected aspect of RSE education at school, it's little wonder, therefore, that 23% of our young people are turning to pornography as a main source of learning about sex, intimacy, and relationships. And what's more troubling is that the type of pornography that they are exposed to is often violent, degrading, and usually portrays, in many unfortunate situations, non-consensual sex. I'm going to share some more stats on this in a moment. So why is this happening? Well, pornography has long influenced expectations about sex and relationships, but with increased access today to smartphones, social media, and AI, young people are more exposed now than ever. AI has introduced new risks by enabling the creation of sexualized content, including deep fakes and nudification images. As outlined on the slide, AI is increasing both in scale and speed at which it is distributed and created. And this poses many, many safeguarding risks for schools, and many schools are reporting it's on the rise. This is not only amplifying, therefore, harmful attitudes such as misogyny, objectification, sexual entitlement, but it's also making the creation and sharing of sexual imagery much more normalized and harder to control. Young people may be affected as consumers or victims, and sometimes unknowingly as distributors of this content. In light of proposed government changes in the last few days about banning social media for under 16, that is a welcome thing. However, it's important to note that for under 16s, it's currently not in force. And so while it may take a while to be finalised and pass through Parliament, it's not really currently addressing the realities that our young people are facing today. The survey by the Children's Commissioner for England found that 44% of young people agreed with the statement. Girls may say no at first, but can be persuaded. This highlights concerning misunderstandings around consent and the influence of gendered attitudes. It also suggests how exposure to pornography and online sexual content may be shaping our young people's perceptions and expectations about what is the norm. From a socialization perspective, therefore, early exposure to such material can influence developing attitudes and behaviours over time, particularly during adolescence, when our views and our ideas and our opinions are not fully formed. Schools are reporting a rise in aggression, coercion, lack of scent, gender stereotypes, harmful language. So we really do need to address this now, and there is a connection to pornography. This is the table I referenced earlier, so it does have some pretty hard-hitting content, so my apologies for that. However, we are discussing pornography, and whether we like it or not, our young people are dealing with this issue on a daily basis. It highlights how men and women are portrayed differently in pornography, the way the sexual acts that they're involved in, and it shows a pattern where women are more often depicted as the recipients of sexual acts, particularly those involving aggression, dominance, or submission. Many of the behaviours are degrading, and they reinforce power dynamics between men and women. I'll just give you a few moments because there's a lot of data there. In April 2025, the BBC conducted a survey of over 6,000 secondary schools in partnership with Teacher Tap. They found out that more than a third of teachers reported misogynistic behaviour from their pupils, and 40% felt ill-equipped to deal with this type of conduct. Teachers and parents are increasingly reporting growing concerns about misogynistic and violent content their children are exposed to and the behaviours they're exhibiting, particularly around the objectification of women. This links directly to concerns around pornography, And as you could see from the table before, there is a correlation. These representations, unfortunately, are shaping our young people's attitudes, normalising harmful behaviour and contributing to the types of misogynistic language and behaviour that we're seeing in our schools. The 2026 RSHE guidance is clear, therefore, in its intentions. The expectation is that secondary schools will include lessons on incel culture, consent, and how online activity can impact a person's understanding of sexual ethics and behaviour, as well as content on AI, deepfakes, and a shift in the focus of how pornography is taught. Schools are required, therefore, to ensure that PSHE and RSHE curriculums adequately equip our young people with the knowledge and skills they need to form healthy, safe, and respectful relationships. Findings from the Commissioner's report further shows that young people themselves are not surprised by how this early exposure to pornography begins or how it's impacting their peers. The research also found that children are more likely to encounter pornography accidentally, particularly through social media, than by actively seeking it out. One 16-year-old girl, as you can see on the screen, reported that it was normal. It might be a bit unhealthy because children can get a reliance on it, but it's normal. Our young people are not shocked by this at all, which suggests that there is an attitude shift in society amongst the youth of today. Taken together with all of this in mind, it highlights how embedding pornography into our curriculums is absolutely essential to tackle these issues and to stop them from emerging and becoming more harmful. We know through research and data that the connection between pornography and child development is there. There is ample research and studies that I'm more than willing to share. They will be attached with the PowerPoint that directly links pornography to viewing pornography at an early age to distorting perspectives, realities, impacting expectations. Across this evidence, the main impacts are consistently identified in relation to psychological effects, effects on social development, and behavioural changes. This is why it is essential that we ensure that the pornography content in our curriculums is safe, age and stage appropriate, and that we do not shy away from it. A survey with young people carried out in 2025 by the Sex Education Forum saw 50% of students dissatisfied with their RSE education. Over 1 in 5, 23%, stated to have learnt nothing at all about pornography at school, with a combined 49% learning nothing at all or not enough about pornography. This research and data is one of the many contributing factors that prompted the shake-up with the RSHE guidance. This guidance comes into effect in 2026, and we need to make sure that we are ready to meet the needs of the curriculum, our statutory expectations, and also what young people want. Young people want to learn about this. They want to be prepared, and we need to help support them to become critical thinkers, safe and responsible adults. So what does the new RSHE guidance tell us? Well, it makes it clear that pornography presents a distorted picture of sexual relationships and can shape unrealistic expectations. It emphasises that our teaching must be age appropriate developmentally appropriate, and handled safely. There are some new and updated topics which have emerged because sadly young people are encountering them in online content and pornography, as we've discovered. Now, I won't go into all the details about the specifics that have changed in the RSHE guidance, as we do have an on-demand webinar for this. Instead, I will focus on those changes and updates that most clearly link to teaching about pornography and related themes. Looking at the updated content, we can see that the guidance strengthens expectations that pornography is now addressed more explicitly in terms of its potential to normalise coercive, misogynistic behaviours and reinforce sexual entitlement, which really undermines autonomy, especially for women and girls. There is also a call for greater depth in how sexual violence and harmful sexual behaviours are taught, with a stronger focus on peer abuse. There is a move towards ensuring that students fully understand what consent looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. For example, even if a yes is given, it doesn't always mean that it's consent. And even if a person does give consent and say yes, is it still ethically okay? Overall, what we can see is a major shift towards a more explicit safeguarding and preventative approach, linking the online content to the real world. There is a caveat, however. Topics such as non-fatal strangulation are not to be taught in isolation. Rather, it's to be embedded within the curriculum, alongside key messages about online safety, respect, and there is also Ofsted guidance which recommends giving single-sex pupil groups the opportunity to speak freely about sexual harassment, online sexual abuse, and sexual violence. There's new content about online subcultures, in the incel culture, and a greater focus on tackling misogynistic attitudes. The 2026 guidance, therefore, gives schools a strong rationale for addressing these issues proactively. This is not about just adding more topics to an already crowded curriculum. It's about updating what we have and making it fit for purpose, fit for the young people of today and the realities they are facing. We want to safeguard our young people, nurture their inquisitive minds and curiosity, but we need to do it in a safe and appropriate way. We want to support them to grow up, to decide what their values are and their ethics, and what a healthy and unhealthy relationship should look and feel like. We want them to be confident. We want them to have autonomy. We want them to become critical thinkers. And all of those skills can be taught through a sound, engaging, dynamic, but safe RSE curriculum, which tackles pornography head on. So here are some things to avoid. We don't want any knee-jerk reactions with respect to this new guidance. One of the biggest mistakes is allowing the topic of pornography itself to become the focus of the lesson. We need to avoid shock tactics, moralizing, or simply telling pupils that pornography is harmful and they shouldn't be watching it. Equally, we need activities that invite pupils to ask questions, to feel like they're in a safe, alert environment where they can ask those questions. We need to make sure we do not disclose any personal experiences or opinions or biases, because we all do naturally have them, but an RSE classroom is not the place for them. Lessons should never be planned around generating reactions. They should be planned around clear educational outcomes. We should avoid treating pornography as a standalone issue, disconnected from the wider curriculum. And a common planning error is attempting to cover pornography, consent, healthy relationships, online safety, gender stereotypes, the law, all within a single lesson or 2 or 3 lessons. This can really overload young people, and it results in superficial learning. So what should we be doing? Effective teaching about pornography should be embedded within the RSHE curriculum. We should focus on developing their critical thinking, their media literacy, and their understanding of a healthy relationship. The aim is not simply knowledge, but the ability to critically evaluate how pornography can shape attitudes, expectations, behaviours. How can they challenge these harmful myths and stereotypes that are taking root in the young people's society? Our lessons should be safe and respectful. They should be trauma informed. We need to recognise pupils that might have adverse childhood effects in our classrooms and plan and cater for that. We should always do it with a safeguarding cap on. And we can use distancing techniques to ensure that, such as adopting a problem scenario-based approach. We can anonymise questions. We can come up with fictitious scenarios. And we can ensure that we work in collaboration with the pastoral teams and give them a heads up of when this content is being taught. Ultimately, we should make sure our teaching is inclusive, non-judgmental, avoid assumptions of what students know and do not know, and make sure that any language that we use does not shame young people. But at the same time, we do not want to normalise pornography. We should ensure that all lessons around content as such has signposting links and that wraparound care and support for any children that we know may be vulnerable. And also we should communicate very, very clearly with parents, building transparency and trust and mutual working so they can have these safe conversations as well at home. Oh, I apologise for that. Why that's not on the screen. There we go. The Department for Education recommends that sensitive topics as such, therefore, be taught in an age and stage appropriate way. This will allow our young people to build knowledge and understanding gradually, develop the vocabulary and confidence to discuss the sensitive issues appropriately. And through a spiral curriculum, we get to revisit and strengthen the learning and the concepts year on year. Therefore, we're reducing confusion or any anxiety and potential harm. On the slide, what you can see is one example of how you might do this. At Jigsaw, we use a whole school approach and a spiral curriculum where key concepts are embedded and introduced at a very, very, very early age, all the way back in Key Stage 2. As we've said, pornography must not be taught as an isolated topic. So our approach at Jigsaw is to build upon what they're taught in primary school and every year to scaffold that learning to add another layer of information and depth. Therefore, when they get to these harder hitting topics at Key Stage 4, they're ready and prepared. It's not new, it's not weird, it's not embarrassing, and they've got years worth of knowledge and understanding that they can draw upon. Our approach at Jigsaw, which we strongly recommend other schools do as well, is to ensure that your curriculum is preventative and protective, solution focused, grounded in positive psychology, and age and stage appropriate across all key stages. I'll let you just review what's on the slide. This approach is also extremely useful if you are a through school from 3 to 16. So as you can see at Key Stage 3, for example, we've got contraception and safe sex. We don't just teach it, let's say, in year 9 and then never teach it again. We revisit it throughout Key Stage 4 to ensure that we're really making our students aware and informed, but we're also securing that knowledge. Now, when teaching sensitive topics such as pornography, it's very, very important to have some ground rules in our classrooms to set those boundaries of what is and is not acceptable. We need to ensure that we promote and model respectful, safe, appropriate language, using correct terminology for anatomy parts, and we need to avoid explicit imagery. Scenario-based discussions, as I said before, are really, really helpful for students to explore real-world life situations in a safe and appropriate way. Now, with regards to ground rules, at Jigsaw, we have the Jigsaw Charter, which some of our Jigsaw schools may be very familiar with. These rules are not just in place for young people. They're there also to protect you as teachers. Establishing ground rules is essential in a PSHE classroom. The aim is to support and encourage discussion, but in a controlled and appropriate way. So we have the right to pass. I'd like not to answer that question, please. We respect each other's privacy. We don't ask personal questions. That they don't ask you personal questions. We use positive language and no put downs. We listen to each other. We really want to develop in a PSHE classroom their dialogic talk. And that's really, really important when it comes to relationships, sex, health, education. And working towards that mutual respect. No judgment, no personal stories. And ensuring that when our children walk out of that classroom, they have no misconceptions. They didn't feel unsafe or embarrassed, because then they're likely to not then want to answer questions and participate next time. The SAFE framework. So at Jigsaw, we have developed this framework to help staff who might feel a little bit unconfident or early careers teachers who found out, yikes, they're teaching PSHE and one of the topics is pornography. We've come up with this framework because we understand that responding to tricky questions can be one of the particular areas that teachers often shy away from and feel very uncomfortable with. You know, do I answer this in front of the whole class? How do I answer this safely and appropriately? Now, we appreciate that teachers are facing tough questions, and they will be faced even tougher questions come September. A PSHE classroom is unpredictable in nature. And so with this framework, we'd like to give you some strategies that you could use, develop, take into your classrooms to ensure that when you are asked these tricky questions, you feel confident and skilled at answering them in a safe way. So the S, safe, stay calm. When we stay calm, it not only discourages students from asking awkward questions just to get a reaction, but it also reassures our students that who may be concerned or anxious about the lesson content that it's okay. It makes it easier for everyone to explore difficult topics without anxiety or embarrassment. A, it can be hard not to show how shocked you are. We do need to still acknowledge the question, but we need to do it in the right way. If a student senses that they have shocked you, they might enjoy it and they might continue to do it to get a reaction. So try, where possible, to acknowledge the question without judgment, but to acknowledge it as well. F, follow your safeguarding policy. Teachers need to follow it. Every school has a different way of doing things, so I've not put anything on here with regards to that. But there will be students in many classrooms who find the subject of sex and relationships daunting, and this will be reflected perhaps in some of the questions they may ask. Some students might not know what they want to ask, And in these cases, teachers can emphasize that RSHE lessons may not seem relevant to them now, but they are essential in preparing them for future relationships and adulthood. So try to show students that there are sources of information, provide any signposting and safeguarding links that you can. Always use reliable, factual information. And make sure that in your curriculum, it's planned to be age and stage appropriate. E, escalate. Now, some questions may raise a safeguarding concern, and that's absolutely normal. These could include age inappropriate questions, or asking for a friend type of questions, or real situations students are involved in, which might give you a feeling that there are some unhealthy or controlling behaviours and relationships. It's always important to provide a calm, non-stigmatizing explanation to any questions you get, especially when it comes to pornography and sex. But we still want to encourage young people to seek help and further support. So you must follow your safeguarding procedures and the steps that your school has in place to identify safeguarding risks. And if in doubt, make sure that prior to a lesson, you check the content, and using your knowledge of the students, if you're aware that there is an issue that could be potentially triggering, notify pastoral leads and plan for that as well. Now, I apologise for the 4 questions on the screen. However, I wanted to almost give some support and guidance on how to answer each of these tricky questions using that SAFE framework. I've been asked these questions in a classroom, so I'll go through now how you might answer them, but I'm sure some of you in the past have been asked questions of a similar nature. With all questions, we need to evaluate whether they're being asked out of genuine curiosity, if they're being asked to embarrass the teacher, or if there is a safeguarding concern. Now, the key approach to take at all times is to respond, like I said, in a safe, calm way, offering a non-stigmatizing explanation, because we want to build that trust and not shame students. So here are some examples. Does everyone watch porn? Now, you may say, and trust me, you may have a better answer than me. No, not everyone watches pornography. People's experiences and choices are different. Some young people may come across it accidentally, and some might be actively seeking it out. And many, many people may have not seen it at all. But what is important to understand is that pornography does not provide a realistic picture of what most relationships, consent, and intimacy is like. Okay. Is it just in pornos that people have shaved their pubic hair, or does everyone do it? You may respond, no, people make different choices about body hair, and those choices can be influenced by personal preference, culture, religion, family values, fashion trends, or no reason at all. There is no expectation that someone should remove body hair, and there is a wide range of different attitudes and opinions of what people feel comfortable with. People should always do what they feel comfortable with. However, in the pornography industry, this is a clinical decision, so that camera angles can show close-up images of genitals, and it's nothing to do with beauty or preferences. What is a gangbang? Now, you have to consider where this question has come from. It could be a comment designed to embarrass you, or it could be a genuine question. Either way, shutting it down really will not help. So you may say, that term is used to describe a sexual activity involving multiple people and is often associated with pornography. We don't need to go into explicit detail today, but it is useful to remember that pornography can include behaviours that are designed for entertainment or shock value, and they don't always reflect healthy, realistic, typical relationships. What if someone watches porn underage? Are they in trouble with the law? One response, there are many that you could give, is the law is designed to restrict children's access to pornography. A young person who has seen it is not automatically going to get into trouble. Sometimes young people come across it accidentally. And if you're worried about that, or you know anyone who's worried about that, that it's really important to always speak to a trusted adult who can help you. So I hope going through those helped. They were very long and drawn out, but I wanted to write them down and get them perfect. But in the classroom, you will be thinking on your feet. But before you teach the content, what I would suggest and recommend is thinking of possible questions that you could be asked, or any misconceptions young people might come into your classroom with, and plan some kind of responses for those. It's always better to be prepared. It is important, therefore, to offer answers to questions when you can, but I appreciate that we might not always know the answer, and we might want to go away and think about how to respond. And it's okay. It's okay. Admit that you don't know. Students will actually respect that. But there are a variety of ways that you can provide a safe, inquisitive learning environment. And the number one message here is to show students that you care, that their question is valid, and that you will endeavour to answer it. Encourage students who come to you individually with their questions to come to you at the end of the lesson if they feel a bit shy or embarrassed about it, or you may have an ask it basket in your classroom. I know there's teachers do it many different ways, but the main point here is that building pause points in your lessons, so you're not just constantly being interrupted with miss, sir. If they know that there is going a time coming up in the lesson where they can ask those questions, it should minimize that shouting out and low level behavior. Now, safeguarding responsibilities, as you're all aware, it's part of our teaching standards, and the DfE recognises that teaching RSHE, particularly pornography, may raise safeguarding concerns. But like I said, we do have a statutory duty to protect young people from abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and online harms. So we need to know how to recognise and report concerns. And again, this is where it comes back to really making sure that you're aware of your safeguarding policies and protocols at your school before teaching this content. RSHE supports this safeguarding role by helping young people to understand the relationships and the world they're growing up in. And the Keeping Children Safe in Schools guidance 2025 also reinforces that message that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And it most certainly is your responsibility in a PSHE classroom. Now, some parents may worry that RSHE is too explicit, and you may have questions from parents and governors about it, about the new guidance coming up. Now, what you can do is reassure them that it is age appropriate, it will be taught age appropriate and focused on safeguarding healthy relationships, teaching about consent and online safety. It's not about showing any explicit content. Now, as young people may already encounter sexual content online, it's important that we do alleviate parents' fears, but also reassure them and remind them that young people, that it is in the 2026 statutory guidance and that you are bound to follow it. Evidence and statutory guidance show that it supports a safer decision-making young adults and reduces harm when we do teach this content. And clear communication is key. Schools, you need to be explaining what will be being taught in your curriculums, how it will be taught, but also relying on that it is statutory as well. So sharing your policies, your what constitutes sex education policy, your safeguarding procedures, your curriculum overviews, sharing that with parents, such as also the right to withdraw documentation. This will really build that trust, and it will reduce misunderstandings, and it will create a working partnership between yourselves and parents. At Jigsaw, we do have some parent presentation materials and leaflets that we've created for September for our Jigsaw schools that our schools can use, because we know that parents might be a little bit apprehensive about this new content coming in September. So some key takeaways today, and I have done this purposefully to leave some time at the end for any questions that you may have. But our key takeaway today is that young people are encountering it, whether we like it or not, and at a much earlier age and more frequently than we as adults realise. So RSHE, therefore, is perfectly placed and plays a vital role in helping our young people critically evaluate and challenge these harmful messages, myths, and stereotypes that they're growing up with. Effective teaching about pornography is not about explicit content. It's not about the shock factor. It's about promoting healthy relationships, respect, digital literacy, consent, autonomy, self-esteem, self-worth. The list goes on, because they're all interconnected. And because they're all interconnected, that is why that spiral curriculum is important more than ever. Teaching about pornography, as we said, should be trauma-informed, inclusive, and grounded in safeguarding principles. As teachers, we always strive to make sure our classrooms and our schools are a safe, positive learning environment. And that is no different in a PSHE classroom, even if the content feels a little bit strange or a bit odd or a bit, worrying, because they are going to come into your classrooms, and you say, we're teaching pornography, you're going to get that look. So we really do need to make sure we're putting extra steps and measures in place so it does feel safe, inclusive, and that they can ask questions. Teach about pornography, as we said, is not only statutory, it's an essential part of helping our young people develop holistically. And fundamentally, it's linked to our safeguarding responsibilities and developing and safeguarding young people's emotional and mental well-being and physical well-being. We want our young people to grow up with the skills and knowledge to navigate these relationships and the digital world and the digital relationships they're forming safely and responsibly. At Jigsaw, our email is always open, as are our phone lines. So especially if you're a Jigsaw school, please do get in touch if you have any questions about the content that we've talked through today, or you require any further advice or support on how to teach pornography and the new content in September 2026. And there is a QR code there on the screen that you can click now that shows you further upcoming webinars that we have. Just like this webinar, we have webinars that are recorded, so you can view them on demand. And we have many, many topics coming up as well. Thank you for joining me today. I have purposefully left 15 minutes at the end in case anyone wants to put a question in the chat, or wait for other people to leave at the end and we can talk more directly. However, thank you very much and good luck for September.